Governments secretly all around the world have tested humans in the past, testing twins and triplets to people who are left-handed to human radiation experiments, all done without the knowledge of the public. Project MKUltra is a mind control testing program which took place over many years by testing their patients with different kinds of drugs to try and get the upper hand in the Cold War. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 subjects about the Project MKUltra. The victims of MKUltra. By any American ethical standards, the MKUltra project would surely be turned down today, at least we would hope. However, in 1953, at the height of the Cold War, the U.S. government was desperate to gain headway on the Soviets and all other opposing forces. MKUltra sought to alter an enemy's psyche to gain control over them. In other words, the U.S. government and the CIA were working together to use mind control in war zones. The CIA used numerous drugs that they believed would assist in the mind control project, such as LSD, MDMA, heroin, methamphetamine, and psilocybin, also known as magic mushrooms. CIA scientists thought that these drugs would revert its victims to a childlike state of dependency, rearing them incompetent of performing warlike duties that would ultimately harm the U.S. However, these drugs needed to be tested before using them as a weapon of war. The CIA used some volunteers and some unknowing Americans to test the effects of LSD and other drugs. In one such case, Phyllis Goldberg lost her entire sense of self, sense of family, and ultimately her life by being an unwitting test subject for the MKUltra project. After checking in at the mental institution to seek help for some mild depression, Phyllis Goldberg's life and free will was snatched away from her. She was patient at the Allen Memorial Institute in 1945 when she came into contact with CIA Dr. Cameron. Dr. Cameron was hired by the CIA after outstanding credentials as both the chairman of the World Psychiatric Association and creator of the psychic driving technique. This technique aimed to erase schizophrenia completely by erasing memories and experience from the psyche. This technique didn't work. Goldberg checked out of hospital, unknown to anything around her or herself. Unable to walk and barely talk, it was down to Goldberg's niece, who would take care of her in the coming years. Her niece reported that Goldberg was a completely different person. She reported that her social reactions were completely out of the ordinary and nonsensical. Goldberg would flinch and squirm when her family tried to pat her on the head in an endearing way. At first, her family was confused as to why Goldberg had this reaction, but then they realized she probably went through several bouts of electroshock therapy, which can sometimes be used to treat patients with depression. Additionally, Goldberg would laugh when there wasn't anything to laugh at. Other patients of Dr. Cameron would later come forward and recall the same experiences. In total, patients suffered a complete loss of personality, reverting to a state of childlike dependence, amnesia, and incontinence. Many of the families of affected people have chosen to pursue legal action against Dr. Cameron, the Allen Memorial Institute, and other MKUltra villains. Though they have been given a sum of money for their troubles, it doesn't seem like enough. These families were completely altered after the MKUltra tests. They've lost their loved ones, had to take care of their loved ones, and been duped out of a sense of security in their own country. The repercussions of this kind of illegal project are insurmountable and are a product of war, time, fear that American citizens should have had no part in. Frank Olson's mysterious death associated with the MKUltra project lives in infamy alongside other U.S. government conspiracy theories. Frank Olson started a promising career as a biological warfare specialist for the CIA. He worked out of the U.S. Army Biological Warfare Specialist in Maryland. Olson was an outstanding contributor for the CIA and the U.S. Army until his own run-in with the MKUltra project. Olson was unknowingly dosed with a concoction of LSD and potentially other substances as a part of the MKUltra motive for mind control. After suffering from an LSD trip lasting several days, Olson plunged to his death from a 10th-story window in a New York City hotel. There's been much speculation about his death since then. The official report on Olson's death is marked as a suicide. His family and friends don't believe this. Often, when a loved one commits suicide, The family is reluctant to believe that the person they loved would voluntarily leave them in such a tragic manner. However, in this case, Olsen's family might be right to suspect foul play. Because Olsen was so heavily involved in the business of controlled substances in the war eras himself, the CIA might have had reason to get rid of him. People suspect this because Olsen wasn't unhappy and because he wasn't the one to take lethal amounts of untested drugs on his own. Nonetheless, Olsen was used as a poster child for the U.S. government's war on drugs at the time. The government, namely President Nixon, was heavily concerned with the lethal potential of hard drugs and the unknown repercussions of hallucinogenic drugs. To incite fear into many Americans, Olsen's death was used as government advertising for the lethal effects of drugs like LSD, magic mushrooms, and more. In this sense, the U.S. government was intent on perpetuating the idea that LSD killed Olsen because it's a deadly drug. However, they ignored the data and scientific testing done on drugs like LSD, which prove in most cases that LSD doesn't cause violent behavior or self-harming attitudes. In some cases, hallucinogens are used to cure depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and obsessive-compulsive disorder when used in microdoses. Scientists who test these drugs have told the government that they would only cause such violent or self-harming behaviors if the patient had pre-existing mental health conditions. There is not yet enough research to prove exactly what effect LSD will have on the brain of someone with pre-existing mental health issues. So it's hard to draw conclusions about exactly what motivated Olsen to jump out of the window. Olsen was another unwitting victim to the MKUltra project run by the CIA and U.S. government. Though many other victims lived after being dosed with hallucinogenic drugs against their will, Olsen won't ever get his life or legacy back. Why was MKUltra started? The MKUltra project started as a response to the Soviet efforts to defeat the Americans in the Cold War. American governments and armed forces were fearful that their Cold War opponents were using mind control tactics. This was to torture and elicit confidential information from American prisoners of war. In a perfect world, the results of MKUltra would produce the ideal concoction of drugs, which would act as a truth serum, the U.S. government and CIA to use on its own prisoners of war. Of course, the government never found its perfect match. The project was shut down by the CIA in 1973. MKUltra used 150 test subjects to test the effects of drug they thought could lead to mind control. However, many of these test subjects were illegally and unknowingly dosed with a mixture of drugs. Test subjects for the MKUltra project were often found in mental institutions, where they were being treated for something else entirely, like in the case of Phyllis Goldberg. Patients would check into these hospitals, and instead of getting the treatment they needed, they were subjected to electroshock therapy solely for testing purposes. MKUltra experiments were also present at universities, prisons, hospitals, mental institutions, and other places of high human concentration. The point of this was to avoid suspicion and attribute any adverse reactions to pre-existing illnesses. It was extremely difficult for officials to track exactly how many patients were tested during the MKUltra project. Many mysteries remain about the project, including exactly how many people were tested unknowingly, what kind of compensation they can get for their troubles, the results of the testing, and the trauma that was induced because of it. So what do you make of these subjects around the project MKUltra? As the scientific community continues to grow each year, we find more and more experiments involving animals and new species. We're no longer looking at experiments with rats, but we're onto something much bigger. Animals are being used for science more often than we may think, and we're stumbling upon some interesting discoveries. Between the creation of a new species, space and animals swapping organs with humans, there's a lot to cover. Hungarian scientists accidentally create sturddowfish. This first experiment took place in Hungary, where scientists discovered a problem with the endangerment of sturgeonfish. However, with hundreds of species becoming endangered, what makes the sturgeonfish so unique? While human actions have greatly impacted the lives of animals throughout the planet, the problem surrounding the sturgeonfish comes directly from humans, especially those who eat caviar. Caviar is fish eggs that come from sturgeonfish, and the high demand has led to overfishing at an unimaginable rate. Sturgeons are not known to reproduce very quickly, so it's created quite a large problem for scientists, hoping to keep the species from becoming extinct. Unfortunately, caviar has continued to be sourced due to its high price point, therefore bringing the sturgeon fish to only one conservation status away from being declared extinct in 2020. Looking for a way to boost the sturgeon population, researchers and a team of scientists from Hungary got together to figure out a solution to this problem. The male and female sturgeons were having a hard time finding each other to mate, so they proposed a completely different idea. They wondered if female sturgeons could reproduce without the male, and looked at that as an option. There was already an existing method called gynogenesis, where you could take the male reproductive cell from a similar species, get rid of the competing DNA, and then use it for reproduction in the existing specimen. When this method is done correctly, the specimen should be able to produce a species 100% identical to themselves that are healthy and able to reproduce on their own someday. Seeing this as a viable option for the sturgeon fish, the team decided to experiment with this method and use American paddlefish for the experiment. Coming from a river in the United States, it would not typically come in contact with sturgeons that are found in Russia. The paddlefish is also endangered, so there wasn't much of a risk of the fish crossing. With that being said, they do share an ancestor, making them somewhat compatible biologically. After proceeding with the experiment, nothing seemed to be a problem. The female sturgeon seemed to be healthy and acting as it typically would. The shock came after the eggs hatched, and the baby fish was a crossbreed of the sturgeon, and it looked like an even mix of both fish, taking on characteristics from each species as it became one of a kind. Still left with the original problem, it's difficult to ignore how the fish are treated when the eggs are harvested. Once we've taken what we want, the fish are often left to die, which continues to add to the problem of the sturgeon's possible extinction. Although the scientists were unable to achieve the desired results, discovering that the sturgeon could be bred with other fish was an exciting and monumental moment. Maybe one day we'll find a way to save the sturgeons, but until then, we'll be looking at caviar a whole lot differently. Jellyfish in space experiment. The next experiment is located out of this world, quite literally. While many people dream of visiting space, that dream is only fulfilled for a select few. When you think of space, you typically think of astronauts landing on the moon or in the spaceship. So it's probably safe to say that you've never pictured jellyfish in space. This experiment dates back to 1991, when the SLS-1 mission took over 2,000 jellyfish apharia with them to space, encased in bags filled with artificial seawater. The purpose was to learn about microgravity and to see how their gravity receptors would function. Jellyfish differ from humans in the way that their gravity receptors have statoliths in them, which are only found in the inner ears of humans and other mammals. The scientists studied how the apharia reacted in comparison to the groups that were on the ground to see if there were any noticeable differences. They noticed that the aphra that developed during the trip to space were able to move and swim. Statoliths formed normally in the aphra in space, but the aphra from Earth lost statoliths much faster. With that being said, the aphra from Earth pulsed faster and tended to swim in circles. So what was the point in bringing jellyfish to space? It's essential to find out if statolith crystals form normally in space, since humans have similar crystals in our inner ears that work to maintain our balance. Jellyfish were chosen as the species to study because they develop within a warm temperature in 6 days, and many of their internal structures resemble that of humans. This study pushes us to question and predict what may occur to embryos in more complex life forms while up in space. With no real answer on the rise, who knows what the future of space and life will bring? Pigs and sheep with human organs. For years, scientists have been toying with the idea of crossbreeding humans and animals to create a hybrid. As expected, it was an extremely controversial project but proved to provide a magnitude of insight within and beyond the scientific community. Scientists have dreamt of a world where animal organs could be used for human transplants to save lives. Each day, thousands of patients are added to a waiting list for an organ they desperately, so it only seems natural to look for a solution outside of our species. In the initial case in 2017, scientists studied pigs and questioned whether they could grow a custom organ within the pig instead of having patients wait extended periods of time and often pass away before they get the organ they need. So, a scientific team created what's known as a chimera, which is an organism that contains the cells of two different species. This led to scientists working to introduce human cells into pigs. With an organ system similar to humans, it seemed like the safest option, although introducing human cells would be no easy feat. After attempting different types of human cells, they began to understand which cells were surviving the longest. Eventually, human cells were injected into pig embryos and they survived. After that, they were put into adult pigs that carried the embryos for a few weeks before they were removed to analog. They saw that a low number would survive to term and that the human tissue had appeared to slow the growth of the pig embryos. After further investigation, scientists discovered that if organs were to be grown from those embryos, they would most likely be rejected by the human body. More work would need to be done before we could safely use animals to grow organs. After that controversial breakthrough in 2017, scientists moved on to sheep in 2018. They became the second successful human-animal hybrid, although the embryos weren't allowed to develop past 28 days. With the stress of more people continually being added to the organ waiting list, scientists have been determined to make headway in this discovery. The sheep experiment proved to be promising as the human cell count in the sheep embryo was about 1 in 10,000. Whilst experts suggest the embryo would have to be about 1% human for the organ transplant to be successful, they are hopeful that we could get there one day. Do you think these types of experiments will prove to solve issues with organ transplants within our lifetime or beyond? If so, will they have ethical ramifications? Due to their controversial nature, scientists are treading lightly, so it may be a while before larger developments are seen. After looking at the impact these experiments have had, it's difficult to know when we've gone too far and when their use could change the course of history. As science continues to progress, it will certainly be interesting to see what will happen in the future. Will we come across new species as old ones become extinct? No one knows for sure. But what do you make of these interesting experiments? Every government exists for the sole purpose of ensuring law and order. At all costs, the government must ensure that it secures its citizens' best general welfare and interest. Citizens, on the other hand, must also ensure that they are law-abiding, keeping to the various rules and regulations of the country as well as following government principles. A peaceful and safe nation requires the collaborative and harmonious contribution of both the citizens and government. Certain persons will either intentionally or subconsciously set out to violate the laws. These sets of persons pose a great threat to the collective existence of other citizens. They also threaten both global and national peace. Russia is not left out in having appropriate facilities and measures to cater to these persons. Russian prisons are traditionally classified into 4 categories, namely the pretrial institutions where offenders are kept. Pretrials are done before a conviction is eventually passed. The education and juvenile colonies where children or child offenders are kept. The corrective colonies for convicts facing 1 sentence. The prisons for convicts faced with life imprisonment or accused of other heinous allegations. Ognenny Ostrov Prison. The Ognenny Ostrov is a correctional facility, one widely recognized in Russia, which is situated 400 kilometers north of Moscow on Lake Novotsary. Lake Novotsary is a small lake located in the Volhonda region of central Russia. It is reckoned to currently house about 193 prisoners. Ognenny Ostrov was initially founded on the island in 1517 as a monastery. As of present, it is known as the Correctional Colony No. 5 of the Federal Penitentiary Service Administration for the Vologda region. However, it is now home to a secured and super-maximally equipped prison housing notorious inmates and prisoners with a bad reputation. Persons who have been classified and labeled as posing a great security risk to the community and are a threat to both global and national peace have been confined to the Ognenny prisons. These inmates are tagged Volогодsky Piatok or alternatively Piatok. Inmates who have been considered the worst of criminals are being securely kept there. This correctional facility, since the inception of when it was converted from being used as a monastery into a prison, has always been used for very condemned and notorious inmates and was founded by Saint Cyril, who was from Nova Zero. The establishment of the monastery was precipitated after he had first-hand experienced the column of fire, which gruesomely razed the island. Prominent buildings of the monastery have, over time, featured in several stories. The monastery in 1917 was converted to a prison and correctional facility. This action came closely after the October Revolution. After the conversion, it was first used to imprison people who were considered rebels. The rebels were those who were against the October Revolution and were considered as enemies of the revolution. As time went on, between the period of the 1930s and the 1940s, it attained another use. It began to be used for keeping victims of Joseph Stalin's purges. It served as a penal colony for these victims. It didn't end there. A short while after Joseph Stalin died in 1953, it then began to be used as just a regular and normal prison. It began to house notorious inmates and prisoners with a bad reputation who were considered as having non-political linkage. With time, it was converted to be used for a more specific purpose. It then began its full operation of housing prisoners and inmates who were known for notoriety and have been sentenced to life imprisonment, or those that have been previously sentenced to death for the heinous offenses committed. For those with the death sentence, good luck shined on them, and they had their death sentence commuted to life imprisonment to be served in Nizhny Ostrov. Unlike several other accounts of maltreatment of inmates and misconduct of prison officials, the Nizhny Ostrov prison facility has had little or no account of any of these allegations. The guards have been known to always respect and accord the inmates due to reverence. Their facility is also more comfortable and their activities less burdensome on prisoners. Despite these facts, the Nizhny Ostrov remains a very secured and heavily guarded correctional facility, which is almost impossible for an escape plan. The Black Dolphin Prison, Russia. One of the oldest prisons in Russia to date is the Black Dolphin Prison. The term Black Dolphin Prison is an unofficial one and is more known than the actual name. It got this unofficial name from a sculpture placed at the entrance of the prison that a prisoner sculpted, which depicts a black dolphin. The prison is officially known as the Federal Penitentiary Service of Russia, situated at the Orenburg region, which shares a border with Kazakhstan. It is a foremost correctional facility to have received prisoners with a life imprisonment sentence with hard labor. At present, the Black Dolphin Prison is known to be a home to about 700 prisoners, which consists of notorious inmates, prisoners with a bad reputation, inmates who breach the right to life of other humans, inmates of the track record of crime commission, prisoners who take advantage of other humans that are vulnerable, and many more. The prison has always been known to house the above-stated categories of notorious inmates and prisoners with a bad reputation. This function had served for as far back as 1745, when it housed the first set of different notorious inmates sentenced life imprisonment with hard labor, and continued afterward up until this very moment. However, in 1773, after Pukachev's rebellion was suppressed, the prison began to serve other uses. It began accommodating different categories of inmates as long as they are serving a life sentence with hard labor. The Black Dolphin Prison is carefully structured and built in a way as to properly house these categories of inmates and to withstand and foil any possible escape plan of either of the inmates. There are different cells where each prisoner is kept. These cells are strongly built with a set of 3 steel doors and several other barricades. Inmates are placed under very strict surveillance and checks. Every 24 hours, the inmates are moved to a large and open cage for an hour and 30 minutes. While in the open cage, they get to interact and exercise. Likewise, during that same period, inmates in their cells are thoroughly searched for any possible sign of an illegal item, contraband, or any harmful possession which could be used to inflict harm on self or any other inmates. The prisoners are thoroughly monitored and watched. They barely have time to wander aimlessly, sit or rest on their different bunks from the time they wake up until they go back to sleep. The inmates are fed up to 4 times a day, and there is the usual culture of a guard moving around every 15 minutes, having a quick check at inmates and ensuring they are not breaking any rules or regulations guiding their stay at the prison. For the routine 15-minute checks, a guard moves around to see if things are in order. The inmates, as when appropriate, are required to respond with a shout, "Yes, sir." The only items these inmates are freely given access to are newspapers, books, radio, and of course, food utensils at the venue where they are eating their food. The prison is so carefully guarded and constructed to prevent any escape plan whatsoever. Even when inmates are brought in for the first time, they are usually blindfolded so they won't be able to map out any blueprint of the prison. Even when the movement of inmates is within the Black Dolphin prison from one building to another, they are still blindfolded and securely escorted with enough man-force to suppress any rebellious move or aggressiveness. While transporting the prisoners from one building to another, they are usually handcuffed with both hands to the back, while one of the guards holds the hand that is cuffed, raising it up and above the hip and waist in a way that the prisoner has no choice than to bend over. This position discards any thought of overpowering the guards and affords the guards an advantage position as well as preventing the prisoner from escaping. Despite the various security measures and the availability of enough workforce to keep things in order between inmates, rumors have still been peddled about how these inmates still find a way to maltreat themselves. From time to time, guards have found the inmates in possession of various contraband and illegal items. The height of it all is that there have been allegations of misconduct by guards and the prison service officials themselves who have from time to time maltreated prisoners. However, none of these claims have been substantially validated. Regardless of various laws and regulations, as well as the different correctional facilities, this has not stopped people from committing crimes. The penal techniques of punishment for the violation of the law have not stopped some from engaging in activities that are harmful to our collective existence. But what do you make of these Russian prisons? Is there life outside of our planet? It's a question that's been asked countless times. Space agencies at NASA have done a great job at discovering new planets, as some of these have a similar layout to Earth, meaning that there's a possibility that it could hold complex life. It's these discoveries that have caused us to explore certain regions more. Interestingly, though, we don't have to travel far to find possible life, as scientists and researchers have said that other complex life forms could actually be within our very own solar system. One place that's of particular interest is that of Jupiter's moon Europa. Due to this moon being of high interest, space agencies have said they want to send rovers to this moon, and this is for the sole purpose of finding out if there's life in its vast oceans. Known as the Europa Lander mission, NASA scientists theorize that the most likely candidate for life to be found in our solar system is expected to be within the icy surface of Europa, due to the expectation of the moon holding vast amounts of water beneath the frozen surface. Data surrounding Europa states that the moon holds a vast salty ocean of water, similar to our oceans on Earth. This giant ocean is said to span the moon's entire globe. Additionally, due to the frozen surface, scientists expect the conditions of the water to be favorable, as the ice surface acts as a natural atmosphere barrier against radiation, similar to our electromagnetic field, giving life desirable conditions to flourish without its deep oceans. NASA plans on sending a Europa river to the moon in an attempt to penetrate its surface and collect samples more than 4 inches deep, to better understand the complex chemistry of materials from the ocean below. Efforts are already being made by NASA engineers to design a rover similar to the Martian rovers, and these will carry military laboratories within the lander to analyze samples, but with the addition of an onboard chemical analysis lab, and this would be able to hold microscopic cameras for the analyzation of bacterial microbial life. Although the project is still in its conceptual stages, it holds high promise in the search for extraterrestrial life, and seems to be of growing priority in the coming years. Interestingly, this isn't just fantasy either. A British scientist has come forward and said that it's almost a certainty that Jupiter's moon Europa is home to alien life, but they noted that these creatures could look similar to the octopus that we have on planet Earth. The researcher behind the comments is that of Monica Grady, who's currently at the Liverpool Hope University. As mentioned, this vast ocean that can be found underneath Europa is a prime candidate for otherworldly life. It's not just Europa that they suspect life could be teeming. They went on to express how they think that deep caverns and caves on Mars could also be hiding complex life. Monica Grady said the following about the possibility of there being life on Europa. When it comes to the prospects of life beyond Earth, it's almost a racing certainty that there's life beneath the ice on Europa. Elsewhere, if there's going to be life on Mars, it's going to be underneath the surface of the planet. There, you're protected from solar radiation, and that means that there's a possibility of ice remaining in the pores of the rocks, which could act as a source of water. If there's something on Mars, it's likely to be very small. Something like bacteria, but I think we've got a better chance of having slightly higher forms of life on Europa, perhaps similar to the intelligence of an octopus. Many have praised the scientists for making these kinds of comments. After all, when it comes to scientists and otherworldly life, we don't usually get an open response such as this one. They usually shy away and say there's a very low chance of there being life on other planets. So many noted that as a nice change to hear a scientist be open to the idea of there being life on moons such as Europa. The octopus is one of the most recognizable creatures, but it's a creature that's shrouded in mystery. Over the years, many different researchers have expressed their interest in these creatures and have said that their makeup is fascinating. Recently, scientists have discovered the octopus. Squid and any other cephalopod evolved completely different from nearly every other organism on the planet. But a recent study has shown that some species are able to edit their RNA sequences on demand to adapt to their environment. This has baffled some researchers. When an organism changes, it starts with a genetic mutation. This can be due to change in the DNA of said animal. These changes are then put into place by RNA. Going back to the study, it was discovered that a squid had edited over 60% of RNA in its nervous system. This meant this creature was able to adapt to wherever it was at any given time. It's like us being able to adapt to living in the desert and then the Antarctic in a matter of seconds. This study also showed researchers that octopus and cuttlefish can do the same thing. This isn't the only interesting discovery to come from our oceans. Another creature of interest, and one that could change our understanding, is that of the scarlet jellyfish. The scarlet jellyfish is an incredible species that's able to restart their life. When these creatures have sustained damage, they will start to make their way to the bottom of the ocean. Once here, they will start the process of turning back into a juvenile form of a jellyfish. After this, they'll spend around 3 months growing back into an adult. After this, they'll carry on their life until they get injured again. Incredibly, researchers have witnessed one jellyfish performing this cycle 12 times. Due to the immortal jellyfish's capability of biological immortality, pharmaceutical research has taken an interest in this creature. It could potentially mean that sometime in the future, we'll be able to harness this ability. It's due to these otherworldly abilities that some have put forward the idea that octopus and jellyfish didn't originate from this planet, and that they were somehow transported here. One idea is that their eggs could have traveled vast distances and arrived on our planet from an asteroid. Although this may sound far-fetched, the shield shrimp eggs are able to last for many years. They lay eggs, and if the conditions aren't right, they'll stay on hatch for up to 7 years. When there's a right amount of water, the thousands of eggs will come to life. As of right now, the Europa lander is still in its early stages, with NASA working hard in order to get this mission sent to the icy moon. The idea is that if everything goes to plan, the mission should be launched around 2025. NASA said the following on their website: "The moon is thought to contain a global ocean of salty water beneath its frozen crust, and if life exists in that ocean, signs of its existence biosignatures could potentially find their way to the surface, where a spacecraft could sample and study them." So what do you guys make of the claims that there could be life underneath the Arctic crust? Zach Baggins developed his interest in the paranormal when he was just 10 years old. His mother regularly took him to garage sales or antique stores to find artifacts that were purportedly haunted, spooky, or just plain unusual. Since that day, he's dedicated himself to a lifelong pursuit of answers about the afterlife, using scientific methods to explore the paranormal and the supernatural. For over 10 years, he's hosted the TV show Ghost Adventures, giving the general public an insight into his studies of communications with those who have long since died. Recently, he has returned to his roots and begun collecting paranormal artifacts. Since 2017, Zach has made his collection available to view at the Haunted Museum, located in downtown Las Vegas. It's not entirely unexpected that a collection of the world's most haunted items would be shrouded in mystery and unusual happenings. Yet, even to connoisseurs of the supernatural, some of the items contained in the museums have had shocking impacts. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at 3 paranormal mysteries. The Dybbuk box, first mentioned in Jewish mystic text from the 16th century. A dybbuk is thought to be the soul of a deceased person. Some sources call this soul dislocated, meaning it's been ripped from its body. The soul is generally thought to have a malicious intent. It wanders the earth seeking a living host to possess. Only by possessing a living being can the soul complete whatever evil task it's returned to earth to do. According to historical folklore, the only way to rid oneself of one was to go through a complicated exorcism ritual. The affected person had to submit his or her body to a trained, powerful rabbi, in the presence of 10 other men who would purify themselves through fasting and ritual immersion beforehand. The men would dress in white shrouds that normally adorned corpses before burial, and wrap themselves in the Jewish prayer shul and sacred parchments. Surrounded by this eerie scene, the rabbi performing the exorcism would address the soul directly, beseeching it to release its grip on the sufferer. If anything were known about the soul's human life, the rabbi would list the sins it had committed. Then the Torah would be removed from its ark, and 7 blasts would be blown on the shofar, a rantorn repurposed to be a musical instrument. The men in attendance would light 7 black candles and recite 7 different combinations of the holy 42-letter name of God. After this demonstration, the soul might be compelled to return to the evil realm from whence it came. The exorcist has to remain brave and display no fear, otherwise it's said that it might cause permanent damage to the possessed person, or it might enter someone else rather than return to its own realm. Dear book, possession is rare. There are few recorded historical instances, both within the Jewish community and outside of it. For many years, it seemed it was just a phenomenal loss to history. That is, until 2012, when a wine cabinet, said to contain a deer book, was listed on eBay. According to the box's original owner, he'd purchased it in 2001 from the granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor. Her grandfather had reportedly purchased it in Spain after escaping Nazi-occupied Poland, but had never opened it. Legend had it that it was haunted. In an act that we now know to be foolish, the owner of the box opened it up. Within, he found 2 1920s pennies, 2 locks of hair, bound with cord, a statue engraved with a Hebrew word, a golden wine goblet, and a dried rosebud. He decided to sell the box as a novelty. Between 2012 and 2017, it passed through a series of owners. All of them experienced mysterious ailments, including a series of horrific recurring nightmares, unexplained hives and welts, and even coughing up blood. The final owner decided he had enough. He consulted a team of rabbis to seal the box, trapping whatever was inside, and donated it to the only man who could handle such a haunted item, Zach Bagans. Boxers said to be the most haunted item in the museum. In 2018, Bagans was showing it off to a friend, rapper and musician Post Malone. Bagans made the ill-advised choice to take the plexiglass cover off of the box and touch it for the first time. Post Malone, perhaps sensing something rather malevolent, grabbed Zach's shoulder to stop him. This was enough for the Dybbuk, who was purportedly able to transfer a curse through Zach to Post Malone. After his visit, Post Malone did experience a series of accidents that seemed more than coincidental. In the 3 months following his visit, his private airplane nearly crashed and was forced into emergency landing after its tires blew out. His Rolls-Royce was involved in a serious car accident in Hollywood, and his home was targeted by 3 armed robbers in a dangerous invasion. Speaking with TMZ, Bagans shared their belief that all of these occurrences were caused by the box. He vowed to open the box and, if possible, break the curse. Unfortunately, when he attempted to do so, he sensed a strong presence and knew that Post Malone would likely come to further harm if the box was tampered with anymore. Post Malone himself hasn't commented on the rumors since 2018. As far as we know, the box remains covered, and the curse seems to be biding its time. However, it's not the only dangerous spirit at the museum. Unidentified flying orb. In 2019, the Haunted Museum was doing excellent business. It was quickly becoming one of the top attractions in Las Vegas. However, the afternoon of June 21st had the potential to derail all of the museum's success. Each day, hundreds of guests take the museum's guided tours. These last about an hour and 15 minutes. The tour is the opportunity to get up close and personal with some of the world's most haunted attractions. However, one woman may have gotten far too close for comfort. Security footage from the afternoon shows something peculiar. A moving blip of bright white light. The orb is small but speedy, and it moves across the frame in a manner that seems determined, almost as if it has a mission. In the 30-second clip, the glowing orb brushes just past a woman and flies out of frame. Just seconds later, the woman collapses to the ground in a dead faint. Security guards and others can be seen attempting to revive her, and the orb doesn't make a return on the screen or to the museum. Museum staff are confident that the woman, whose name hasn't been released to the public, had a close encounter with a malevolent spirit. Speaking to local NBC News, tour guide Earl Brown said the object was a spirit orb. Spirits can manifest in these orbs of light. Brown explained, a lot of times when spirits touch you, they can drain your energy and it can happen quite quickly. When that happens, you literally can go down. NBC also interviewed some other museum goers who agreed the orb was most likely some kind of ghost or other spirit energy. Internet readers, on the other hand, all weren't so convinced. Many argued that the orb was a blip on the security footage or even a small bug. The tour guide Earl Brown thinks otherwise. He explains the orb clearly showed intent in its flight, touching the woman and then flying away from the path of the camera. Staff at the museum have not disclosed which artifact or spirit may have affected the woman that day. There's simply too many to identify which may have caused the harm. However, in addition to our previous topic, there's one other artifact which has a particularly malevolent intent. The Peggy doll. Featured on an episode of Zach's show Deadly Possessions, Peggy is an especially powerful haunted object. An unassuming blonde doll, Peggy's powers are said to be so strong, she can possess viewers when they look at her, in person or in photos. Both her episodes of Deadly Possessions and her room at the Haunted Museum come with disclaimers for viewers. Zach's research into Peggy's history led him to believe she was possessed by a woman born in 1946 in Holland Park, London. She may have died from a chest-related condition, possibly an asthma attack. Psychics have speculated the woman may have been Jewish and could have had ties to the Holocaust. Little else about the spirit herself is known, but Peggy's effects on people are well documented. In 2015, a video of Peggy was posted on YouTube. Over 80 people who watched it suffered chest pains, migraines, and severe nausea. Some viewers also reported that Peggy seemed to be able to affect their dreams. When they went in to film the doll for the show, she caused terrifying activity during filming. This included manifestations of flies, camera problems, and negative mental effects on the crew. Baggins also interviewed a woman who told him that she suffered a heart attack within seconds of looking at the doll. Since Peggy was put on display, visitors have reported several strange interactions with her. Guests have tried to enter her room, only to be stopped in their tracks by a mysterious pressure. Others have reported the chest pain that seems to be a hallmark of Peggy's supernatural abilities. For the safety of visitors, Baggins has instituted strict regulations over who may enter her room. This includes requiring guests to sign a special release. So far, Peggy's not killed or seriously harmed anyone at the museum, but her track record indicates the day might just be coming. With nearly 5,000 Google reviews, it's clear the Haunted Museum remains a popular tourist attraction despite its potential danger. Would you visit this paranormal paradise? Or do you think it's best to stay away? So what do you make of these paranormal mysteries? 2020 has seen its fair share of asteroid discoveries, with many of these coming into close contact with our planet. For this reason, these asteroids are given the name of potentially hazardous asteroids. NASA made the following statement. Potentially hazardous asteroids are currently defined based on parameters that measure the asteroid's potential to make threatening close approaches to the Earth. This recent asteroid is known as 465824-2010 FR, which is said to come close to our planet on September 6th. This asteroid measures in at just over 160 meters in diameter. Although it doesn't sound particularly massive, and there have been much larger asteroids discovered in recent years, this one is about average for the type of asteroid it is, and that doesn't mean that if it were to make contact with Earth that it wouldn't do much damage. In fact, scientists who have carried out simulations have said that an asteroid of this size would be capable of taking out a small city. It's one of the reasons why it's so important for scientists to conduct further research on these objects once they've been discovered. This helps scientists and researchers to understand what its behavior is like, how fast it's traveling, and what the chances are of it making contact with our planet. Scientists found out that asteroid 465-824-2010 is currently traveling at over 8.6 miles per second. Right now, though, it looks like Earth is safe from the celestial body, as researchers noted that it should fly by us at a comfortable 4.6 million miles. Teams of researchers were able to detect this asteroid early on, and even managed to watch it in action as it soared through the cosmos. The Virtual Telescope project said the following. The telescope carefully tracks the apparent motion of the asteroid, so stars result in long trails, while the asteroid looks like a sharp dot of light in the center of the image. It's marked by an arrow. The full moon was not far in the sky, so the image was taken under less than ideal conditions. Despite this, asteroid 2010 FR is well visible. At the imaging time, asteroid 465-824-2010 FR was around 7.8 million kilometers from the Earth, and it was slowly approaching us. Regardless, although it's still millions of miles away from us, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration has labeled this space rock as being potentially hazardous. This comes down to the fact that at some point in the future this could pose a threat to Earth, meaning it's been added to the long list of other asteroids that will need to be monitored in the future. What's scary though is NASA have said we currently wouldn't be able to stop the majority of asteroids that come close to our planet, but they are working on robotic rovers that would be able to nudge the asteroid in a different direction. Tests have been mapped out, and it's shown researchers this would be one of the best ways to stop an asteroid from colliding with our planet. Hopefully, though, this day doesn't come anytime soon. So what do you make of these interesting discoveries? In the 1960s, NASA was preparing to send astronauts to the moon for the first time. In order to do this safely, they needed high-resolution photos to make sure the surface of the moon was safe to land on, and to help them pick potential landing spots. These photos would help prepare astronauts for their trip to the moon, which would take place in 1969. Boeing and Eastman Kodak have already developed a spacecraft for the Department of Defense that contained its own camera system, and researchers were able to use this technology for their mission. NASA launched Lunar Orbiter 1, the first of 5 lunar orbiters, on August 10, 1966. It took the orbiter 92 hours to get close enough to orbit the moon. Some describe the orbiters as flying photography lamps. Before this, however, the first unmanned mission to the moon was in 1959 by the Soviet lunar program, with the first manned landing being Apollo 11 in 1969. The primary objective of Apollo 11 was to complete a national goal set by President John F. Kennedy, and this was on May 25, 1961. The goal was to perform a crewed lunar landing and return to Earth. During the exploration, the 2 astronauts were to collect samples from the moon and return them to Earth. They were also given instructions to photograph the lunar surface as much as they could. On July 20, 1969, American astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first humans ever to land on the moon. Around 6.5 hours later, Armstrong became the first person to walk on the moon. The mission was a success, and the astronauts along with NASA were hailed as doing the impossible. It brought in a whole new audience who had an interest in space and space exploration. It's hard to imagine what the astronauts would have been thinking while they were up there. Being alone when no man has ever been is massively daunting. But the question that some have had in recent years is, were they truly alone? If you ask the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, they will tell you that when they was on the moon, the astronauts were completely alone. But others are not so sure about this. The evidence they have for the astronauts allegedly not being enlightened is that of old Apollo photographs that seem to show strange objects in the background. Now, before we continue, it's important to note that NASA and other scientists have denied these claims, stating that what people are seeing is just anomalies on camera equipment or space debris that happens to get picked up by their camera. Theorists don't believe these claims, though, as they've said these objects that are seen in old Apollo images matches those seen on Earth. This in turn has caused amateur researchers to speculate that perhaps these crafts have been witnessed by millions of people across the world, are actually coming from outer space. Now, it's important to remember that a UFO is simply an object that cannot be identified at that moment in time. It's only been in recent years that UFOs and aliens are being linked. Regardless, it's still bizarre the amount of reports that are submitted every year in regards to UFOs. In recent years, it hasn't just been random people that have come forward with their encounters. Credible eyewitnesses have opened up about seeing UFOs. This includes people like pilots and even astronauts themselves. On top of this, Navy officials and even the U.S. government have opened up about the UFO phenomena, causing some to think that perhaps there's more to these sightings than what we're being told. Going back to the Apollo missions, this interesting photograph was said to have been taken during Apollo 17. As stated on NASA's website, Apollo 17 was the last lunar landing mission. 3 EVA activities lasted a total of 22 hours and 4 minutes on the lunar surface. Botanical researchers managed to find this interesting anomaly in the background of one of the images. The theorists stated that the craft is triangular in shape and matches those that are commonly reported on Earth. These triangular UFOs have been seen for years, with pilots commonly detailing similar-looking crafts. After being shared in UFO grooms, one of the members said the following: "It's tedious work, but if you have the time, many of these strange objects can be found in old Apollo images. They match the triangle UFO that so many have seen, displaying the 3 lights that the craft often gives off." End quote. It's often said by some that these crafts are owned by the government, but it begs the question, did they have these triangular crafts in use back in the 60s, or do they belong to someone else? These giant black triangles are commonly seen in various countries, most commonly the United Kingdom, the United States, and Germany. The craft in the photograph matches the description of the triangle UFO, which caused some to suggest that they don't belong to us. Various triangle-shaped UFOs have been seen close to the moon, which has made some question why they're there and why they're so interested in our moon. As mentioned, this craft in the Apollo photograph matches the typical description of the triangle. For over 40 years, the triangle UFOs caused much debate. It's perhaps one of the most common shaped UFOs that's been seen. These crafts are often reported as being silent, and have been on a number of occasions just hovering in the sky. Sightings of the triangle UFOs often come in waves, with people seeing dozens at a time. They are also perhaps the most photographed UFO as well, with even news programs covering them. What's most impressive about these objects is that they've been witnessed hovering motionless in the sky, and then suddenly making a high-speed departure. Pilots have said that they are faster than any conventional aircraft that's currently in the sky. Some have put forward the theory that the triangle UFO is a top-secret government craft, while others have said that it's most likely the next step in the stealth series of crafts, hence why they're able to do things that other planes can't. There is still a group of people, though, that think these objects are unexplained. Although we mentioned that sightings come in waves, here in the UK these crafts are seen nearly every other week. Incredibly, there have been around 4,000 reports of the triangle UFO since the 1990s in the UK alone. There have also been waves of triangle UFO sightings in Belgium, France, Holland, and Germany. Going back to the Apollo photograph, skeptics point out these small dots can't be taken seriously and that what people are seeing is just some type of photographic anomaly. Others, however, have disagreed with this idea and have said this isn't the first time that a strange-looking object has been photographed in space. So what do you guys make of this photograph taken on the moon? Do you think it shows a triangular object? Or do you think it's just a photographic anomaly? 2020 has certainly been an eventful year. Whilst we have been tucked away inside, occupied with TV and video meetings, it is easy to think the outside world has stopped almost entirely. But the world has kept going, and some bizarre scenarios have emerged. So, it is time to shed some light on the ongoing investigations you may have missed. Why elephants are passing away. For decades, we have known some species of elephants, particularly Asian elephants, have been endangered, nearing extinction, often hunted and poached for their tusks, in order to gain ivory for decor or medicinal purposes. But 2020 has seen an awful phenomenon in elephants rapidly passing away, where poaching and us humans now pose less of a threat to these creatures than the currently unknown cause of death. The last death count from this nameless killer is 350, although estimates suggest the reality is a much higher figure. May and June saw what is being dubbed a conservation disaster in which elephants began mysteriously passing away. Regardless of their age, gender, and prior health, all elephants appeared to be equally affected. Are there connections between the passing of these elephants? Research showed many would walk in circles before collapsing. With no other indicators, it has been hard for scientists to determine how and why this is happening. Okavango Delta in Botswana saw the first initial deadly mysterious outbreak. This reduced the hundreds of elephants visible from above to only 8, all having either passed away or fled from the danger lurking. Unfortunately, the tragedy of this tale isn't over yet, as soon after seemingly random passing of several more elephants in the neighboring country Zimbabwe. Could this be a link? How do we find out if these horrific events are connected to one another? Scientists believe finding a fresh carcass may allow some truth to be found as to what is behind this rapid conservation disaster. The lack of definitive answers to hand has led to many theories and speculation, with the possibility of human poisoning being deemed unlikely due to the lack of chemicals such as cyanide found when testing. Furthermore, a hunter's desire for ivory was not satisfied, as corpses showed the tusks remained untampered with and in good condition. So if not humans, what causes may be plausible? Current research suggests neurotoxins in algal blooms or encephalomyocarditis may be the cause of this devastation. Approximately 70% of these elephants passed away near waterholes. Toxins within the water were initially eliminated as possibilities due to elephants being the only species to suffer. But further research may have discovered elephants are simply more vulnerable to these toxins due to the large time they spend within the water, the sheer volume of water they consume within the day, and the quantity of olfactory receptors within their trunks. This combination means elephants are likely to have had much greater exposure to the toxins than other animal species potentially drinking the same water, therefore making them more susceptible to falling ill if this is indeed a waterborne illness. This possible explanation is supported by Professor Christine Godson from the University of Liverpool, who has an experienced background in studying the toxicology of chemical warfare. Her research states a possible passing of these creatures could be a recently found bacterial toxin called BMAA or beta-methylaminoalanine, which is produced by algae. Beached whales and dolphins who have tested positive for this toxin had also shown symptoms of disorientation. Could the mysterious act of walking in circles before they passed away be an indicator of the lost and bewildered behavior symptomatic of the BMAA toxin? While this certainly sounds like a plausible explanation, BMAA is typical to marine environments and not the fresh water of the waterhole, leading some scientists to question whether there could realistically be a high enough concentration of toxins within the water to take the life of an elephant. The second factor prominent as a possible explanation is a rodent virus. Many animals, when ill, will instinctively search for water, so many corpses close to water does not necessarily mean that the waterhole was a source of a poison or the cause of death. After a string of consecutive dry summers, the summer showers of 2020 have led to a surge in farming success, causing rodents and elephants alike to flock to the croplands. The defecation on the grass and crops by rodents then elephants may eat allows for the potential for an elephant to contract the rodent viruses, namely EMC. This is a well-established cause of the passing in elephants previously, for example zoos that have a large number of rats. Accounts given by witnesses describe elephants stopping within their tracks, which aligns with the behavior and actions seen in cases confined to zoos. However, research suggests EMC is more likely to terminate males, whereas this was not the case in Botswana. Extensive testing and research are the only ways to determine the root of this issue. We can only hope this incident remains an isolated and rare occurrence. Mystery gas discovered at the center of the Milky Way. Our galaxy is much bigger than we often picture it to be, but marvels like this help put into perspective the vast wonders of space. In 2020, a dense, cold gas was discovered to have been shot from the center of the Milky Way and was described as being like bullets. Although it is still unknown how this gas was fired, we do know that this discovery has the potential to have a significant impact upon the future of the Milky Way. Professor Naomi McClure-Griffiths from the Australian National University explained that the loss of so much gas results in a loss of material that has the potential to form stars. If too much of this gas is lost, then the galaxy becomes incapable of forming new stars. McClure-Griffiths stated that to be able to see hints of the Milky Way losing this star-forming gas is kind of exciting. It makes you wonder what's going to happen next. Did this wonder happen to the black hole at the center of our galaxy or the star formations around it? Whilst those are both possibilities, scientists and researchers currently do not know how either one of these could produce this effect. Dr. Enrico de Teodoro from Johns Hopkins University described that it gets more complicated the more we learn about it. Explaining events like this have been observed from afar in other galaxies. Though there, the black holes observed were significantly larger, and star formations saw higher levels of activity. Our own galaxy being much smaller and closer means that we can study events in more detail, but such exciting phenomena are much rarer so close to home. With such exciting discoveries happening right in our very own galaxy, it really is a true reminder of how little we know about the universe. The mystery of the fast radio burst. April 28, 2020 saw a sensational event of fast radio burst, also known as FRB. A combination of radio and X-ray energy sources were produced from neutron star SGR 193 plus 2154, found in the constellation Vulpecula in the Milky Way. The last FRB occurred from the same dead star 30,000 years ago. And whilst other instances are traced to stars hundreds of light years away, this fast radio burst can be found within our galaxy only 30,000 light years away from Earth. Other than being a rare event, what is so exciting about an FRB? This FRB lasted only approximately half a second, but prompted global alarms within the burst alert system. The energy recorded within mere milliseconds exceeds that of the sun created for a century. Scientists are unsure as to the cause of such rapid energy outbursts, though speculation ranges from the collision of black holes to the emissions from spacecrafts from another life form. The burst alert system allows for quick action to be taken, facilitating investigation in the prime time for discovery immediately after the event. The lead author of the FRB study, Sandro Marigetti, stated that this was the first time we had ever seen a link between magnetars and fast radio bursts. This marks an event that will go down in scientific history. Fast radio bursts were first discovered in 2007 and remain to be both a fascinating and puzzling subject within astronomy. In the first observation and interaction scientists had with this event, only X-rays were detected and recognized until a year later a magnetar, a neutron star, with a stronger than expected magnetic field became active and ejected both radio waves and X-rays. The majority of fast radio bursts that have occurred relatively recently have been traced back to magnetars, suggesting a correlation between the expulsion of these radio waves and X-rays and the intense electromagnetic fields characteristic of a magnetar. Such thrilling scientific wonders and potential for such marvelous breakthroughs and discoveries. This is a testament to the wonders the universe and our galaxy hold. 2020 has without a doubt been an eventful year, but the odd happenings and changing definitions of the ordinary extend past us humans being stuck at home. It is remarkable to remember that exhilarating phenomena in our galaxy are occurring as we speak, and the unknown happenings upon Earth continue to be investigated. We continue to stumble upon the strange and unusual, asking questions we didn't know we needed to ask. What mysteries await us in 2021? But what do you make of these mysteries from 2020? With all the devastating news circulating around the world right now, it's important for us to take a moment to warm our hearts. These 3 stories will remind you of all the positivity that's still left around us. The men who saved bear cubs. It was a normal fishing trip for Ruslan Lukanen and his friend until they noticed something floating out in the middle of the lake. The pair were out on a lake, which was an extremely frigid body of water in the northwestern area of Russia. Temperatures in the lake can drop as low as 4 degrees below zero. The dangerously low temperatures sparked concern in the fishermen. They knew that if the floating object were a person, the person would be in a life-threatening. However, as the pair got closer, they realized the object wasn't a person, but a mother brown bear. She had 2 cubs on her back and was swimming through a swift current. The bears likely had no choice but to try to cross the water, despite the current and chill. This was because food is scarce in the tundra. Bears mostly eat berries and salmon, and they may have needed to find more berries on the other side. When facing these difficult situations, mother bears are known to risk their lives for their cubs, so the fisherman was surprised when they saw that the mother bear had abandoned her cubs. Her survival instinct had kicked in and took precedence over her bond with her cubs. The pair quickly realized that the cubs weren't strong swimmers and that it was up to them to take action in order for them to survive. Lucanine later recalled, "The two steered their boat to the first cub, and it seemed that the baby bear knew instinctively they were there to help him. He instantly tried to climb onto the boat, but was too weak. One of them tried to boost the bear up with a fishing net, but the cub was too heavy for this to be done easily. Eventually, the cub displayed extra strength and made it onto the boat. Now the second cub was even weaker, having remained in the water for longer. The bear couldn't lift itself up, and the fisherman couldn't lift the bear in the however. The men thought quickly and found a solution. They realized the cub could use its claw to hang onto the net. So they scooped the bear into the net, and instead of lifting up, they slowly drove the boat back to shore. Then they faced a new problem. Getting the cubs back to land would be difficult. Mother bears are known to be extremely aggressive when her babies are approached, and the fishermen didn't know what to expect. Regardless, they headed towards the island they saw the mother swim to, and left them there under a tree until the mother returned. The men had succeeded in bringing the bears to safety, even after putting themselves in a dangerous situation. Even though the bears couldn't express it, they definitely appreciated it. Raju the crying elephant is saved. Animal rescue can be dangerous, tragic, and seemingly hopeless, but the success always pays off. On July 4, 2014, Raju, an elephant who had been chained and beaten for 50 years, cried as he was taken to freedom in an incredible and emotional wildlife rescue. Raju had been shackled at a home in Uttar Pradesh area of India, living on handouts from tourists passing by. He survived solely on plastic and paper for food. Every day, his owner would sit on his back and force him along hot asphalt streets to make tips. He was believed to have been poached from his mother at a young age. Usually poachers slaughter the mother or drive the herd into small traps that only babies can fall into. Then the babies are tied and beaten in submission to their owners, their spirits broken. The mother cries for her baby for days after it's poached. As Raju was poached as a car, he had been sold so frequently he'd believed to have had up to 27 owners. He was treated as an expendable object that was passed on to someone new every 2 years. Raju was suffering immensely under the owner that he was rescued from. He was beaten with a bullhook, a sharp metal spear used to train elephants in an abusive way. His nails were overgrown, his shackles caused wounds, and walking on a tarmac road caused overgrowing in his footpad. Hearing of this plight, Wildlife SOS, a London-based charity organization, committed to his rescue. Took an entire year of hard work to ensure his freedom. The charity had to prove that Raju wasn't legally owned. It was revealed that his quoted owner didn't have any legal documents stating his possession, so the charity was cleared by the court to rescue him. They then enacted 2 days of intense surveillance to come up with the safest possible game plan for the mission. A year after the organization learned of Raji's story, 10 vets and wildlife experts, 20 forestry department officers, and 6 policemen were able to take him away from his suffering in a dangerous midnight operation. Wildlife SOS founder described the chains around Raji's legs as cutting into his flesh due to the spikes on the chain. Every movement would make him gush from the wounds. Pain and brutality were all he knew. It was elaborated on the details of his rescue, stating, "We quickly realized we had to act as fast as possible. His situation was so desperate and cruelty so extreme, we decided we had to move the rescue forward by a day. But the owner was willing to get in the way." The situation was described as, "He began to shout commands to terrify Raju and try to provoke him. It created an incredibly threatening situation as a bull elephant can break a human like a toothpick if he becomes frightened or angry. When that failed, he then put a series of chains around his legs in an attempt to prevent us from removing him. But we stood our ground and refused to back down. And as we did so, tears began to roll down the elephant's face. It's believed the tears were partially motivated by a sense of coming change. The elephant felt hope for the first time since his suffering began. The tears sparked strong emotions for the team. According to Wildlife SOS UK spokesperson, it was reported that the team were astonished to see tears roll down his face during the rescue. It was so unbelievably emotional for all of us. We knew in our hearts he realized he was being freed. Elephants aren't only majestic, but are highly intelligent animals. They've proven to have feelings of grief, so we can only imagine what torture half a century have been like for him. Until we intervened, he never had known what it was like to walk like unshackled. It's truly heartbreaking and a distressing case. But today, he knows what freedom is, and he'll learn what kindness feels like, and what it's like not to suffer anymore. But the team had no time to process their emotions. They still had work to do. They walked Raju 200 yards to a transportation truck. They couldn't remove his trains on site, so no step of the walk was made easy or painless. Still, he complied and was eventually loaded onto a large truck. He was sedated and driven 350 miles to the Elephant Conservation and Care Center. There, he was fed and his shackles were removed. It took the handlers 45 minutes to fully liberate him from his bonds, which were put on to ensure removing them would be difficult and painful. Ultimately, he received all of his medical attention and care that he needed and is thriving at the center 6 years later. He socialized with other elephants, including his new companions, Rajesh and Bola, and healed his broken spirit. Diane Busher's cat saves family. Pets need their families to survive, and it turns out sometimes families need their pets. On January 23, 2008, Diane Busher woke up at 4:45 to the sound of loud screeching from her cat, Oreo. She followed the noise to the garage and was faced with smoke and flames. She sprinted upstairs to wake her husband and their 5 children. Everyone was able to evacuate safely and firefighters soon arrived to extinguish the fire. It was ultimately revealed the fire was caused by an electrical problem in the garage. This led to an estimated $60,000 in damages. Due to the delay in smoke detectors, it's hard to know what would have happened if the cat didn't alert the family. It certainly would have been perilous for everyone involved. Before the incident, most of the family wasn't fond of cats. However, after this, Oreo is loved even more by every single member of the family. He's now spoiled by a generous amount of tuna. So what do you make of these heartwarming stories and how humans and animals can work together when it comes to life or death? Mike Tyson has gone down in history as being one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. During his prime, he was labeled a knockout artist. He also held many titles. For example, one being that he became the youngest heavyweight boxing champion of the world. And he did this in 1986 at the young age of 20. He was introduced to boxing trainer Costamato, where he would begin to mold Mike into one of the greatest fighters of all time. Since stopping fighting, though, Mike has changed his outlook on life. The once aggressive man now has a much more calm demeanor, explaining that he didn't like who he was in the ring and that certain parts of his life actually scared him. This caused him to make a drastic change. A few days back, he featured on the Joe Rogan podcast, one of the most watched podcasts in the world. Joe has made it obvious he's interested in topics such as Bigfoot, UFOs, secret government programs, and trying to understand human history. It was during this show that an interesting conversation started between Joe and Mike. He asked the former heavyweight champ, "What do you think about aliens?" Tyson then said the following, "Listen, there's more stars in space than there are grains of sand in the desert. Can you imagine that? I think we are aliens. I think we're descendants of aliens. If you can't explain, if you can only tell me about Adam and Eve, I'm going to go with aliens. If that's what you're hitting me with, Adam and Eve, I'm going with these alien guys." Joe then replies with the following, "There's a lot of people that believe we're the product of aliens. The Italians came down and did some experiments with lower hominids and did some accelerated genetic experiments and created people." To which Tyson responded with the following, "Were listened when certain tribes of people, I'm not saying Caucasians when they came to Africa, even before that, when people came to other people and the first time they saw them, they were aliens. Maybe they weren't aliens, but that's what they thought they were. They were just a tribe of people that encountered them." Although the idea of aliens coming to Earth and carrying out experiments sounds like it belongs in a movie, there are many people that believe this happened, and that perhaps an ancient civilization traveled to Earth and seeded it, allowing for life to flourish. It sounds far-fetched because we're not taught these theories, with mainstream scientists saying there's no proof this happened and so it can't be taught. It's interesting to note that over 95% of our prehistory has been lost. So it can be tough for historians and archaeologists to answer many of the questions that people have. UFOs certainly aren't a modern-day thing. They've been depicted in old paintings and scriptures, with one of the oldest coming from the ancient Egyptian civilization. It's these encounters that's caused some to think that perhaps these crafts have been visiting our planet for years. There was even reports of unidentified flying objects in biblical times. Even today, with the skies filled with drones, helicopters and planes, UFOs are still a source of mystery. Imagine then the level of disbelief of seeing such objects before the actual invention of the airplane. Whilst we might think of the UFO as a 20th century phenomenon, the late 19th century saw many astounding reports that brought to those who witnessed them both wonder and fear in equal measures. Almost a decade before the Wright brothers' first flight, numerous sightings of strange cigar-shaped UFOs were spotted across the United States. Starting in 1896 to 1897, these mystery airships were bigger and faster than anything known at the time. The first sighting was reported in the winter of 1896. A light was seen slowly moving across the Sacramento night sky on November 17th, with otherworldly sounds being heard as it passed overhead. Another mysterious encounter happened on April 17, 1897, when inhabitants in a rural American town saw a single alien spacecraft lose control over the skies of Texas. A young boy saw an airship trilling smokes that headed north towards the town of Aurora, slowing and speeding as it tried to regain control of its trajectory. It sailed over the public square, reaching the northern part of town where it clipped the edge of a windmill at speed, then veering into the path of the town's water tower where, upon contact, blew into a number of pieces, scattering debris over several acres of ground and awakening many of the town's residents. The residents that awoke went to investigate the source of the early wake-up call. What they found would astound the townspeople. Having read about numerous mystery airships in national newspapers recently, including an abduction attempt, they wondered if this was something not only extraterrestrial but also evil in nature. On locating the ship's suboccupant, although the pilot had passed away, they soon realized the humanoid was clearly not an inhabitant of this world. Furthermore, strange markings in the manner of hieroglyphic characters were seen on the internal control panel. Townspeople quickly buried the body in the nearby cemetery and removing the wreckage in the hopes that the incident would disappear from the town's history. Allegedly, there's also been mysterious artifacts that have been left behind by people that detailed their encounters with beings that resemble extraterrestrials. One that's confused many scientists and researchers over the years is that of the lost dropper stones. Discovered in 1962 by a man named Chu Eming, the dropper stones were described as being a series of 716 circular stone discs that were dated as far back as 12,000 years ago, predating the first human civilizations. The stones were inscribed with tiny hieroglyphic-like images that detailed a strange story of possible extraterrestrial origin. This story was allegedly translated to state that strange species of being had descended from a cloud in the sky. After realizing they were unable to ascend back into the skies, they were then forced to begin to adapt and live on the planet. This story then detailed the unaware of the nature of these strange beings and their intentions. The local Han Chinese began to hunt them down and eventually wipe them all out. According to the researcher Chu Wenming, the images seem similar to that of modern-day UFO sightings and flying saucers. Believing these stones to be evidence of the record of ancient extraterrestrial contact, in 1962, Chu Wenming published his findings to the archaeological community, only for it to be ridiculed and discredited, and caused Chu Wenming to go to Japan in a self-induced exile of shame. Further information surrounding the stones were described in the Soviet magazine known as Sputnik, that claimed a handful of these stones were sent from a museum to Moscow. Supposedly, a doctor by the name of Vasilyev describes an experiment in which the discs were placed on a special turntable, where they began to vibrate or hum in an unusual repeating rhythm, as they possessed an electric current passing through them. Since these experiments and findings, the stones have gone missing only for them to have never surfaced again. This could very well mean that not only were the stones legitimate in their details and evidence of ancient extraterrestrial contact, but the effort was made by the Chinese and Russian government to cover up these strange artifacts and prevent them from ever being seen again. Many people in the ancient alien community speculate that perhaps these discs could have contained a massive amount of digital data and could be the smoking gun evidence of ancient extraterrestrial contact. So what do you make of the idea that an ancient civilization once traveled to our planet? And do you agree with what Mike said that aliens could be out there? If you're an avid watcher of horror films, or perhaps even religious yourself, you'll probably know what an exorcism is. But if you're not particularly keen on horror movies or not religious, then you might not be so knowledgeable on what it is. Essentially, an exorcism removes any evil entity or demon from a person or an area that's thought to be possessed. And while some people aren't entirely convinced that exorcisms are actually real, they have happened in real life, often with tragic consequences. Exorcisms are actually on the rise, with statistics showing that more and more people are seeking divine help. The exorcism of Anna Eklund. Our first story starts with Anna Eklund. Anna Eklund's name wasn't actually her name. She was born under the name of Emma Schmidt in 1882. However, Anna Eklund was a pseudonym for Emma Schmidt. Eklund's case is well documented amongst demonologists and those who believe in the spirit world. The case was profiled in Time magazine. Anna Eklund's case was out of the ordinary. It was strange even for an exorcism. Born to German parents in Wisconsin, Eklund's family were devout Catholics. Strangely, her Aunt Mina was thought to be a witch, and this is where the family's thoughts would wander when Eklund began to act abnormally. She allegedly started demonstrating revulsion of holy objects and was unable to enter churches. Apparently, she also began to partake in some unspeakable acts, and some who have studied the case believe she may have been ill-treated by her father. However, it wasn't until 1912 that Eklund underwent her first exorcism. The family believed that she'd actually been possessed by the spirit of her aunt, who had cursed the herbs that had been seasoning Eklund's food with. In 1912, Father Theophilus Reisinger, a priest originally from Bavaria, Germany, was instructed with responsibility. This was of performing Eklund's exorcism. It was done quite uneventfully, as exorcisms go, and nothing was heard of Eklund for some years after that. But unbeknownst to the church, Eklund hadn't been effectively exorcised. Over 2 decades later, Father Reisinger was once again summoned. This time, he brought Anna Eklund to a secluded church in a small village and began to try to cleanse her body of the suspected demonic possession of her aunt. This is where it got complicated for Anna Eklund. It was suspected the first and second exorcism didn't work. It was said that it actually took 23 consecutive days of exorcism to clear the evil from Eklund, and some disturbing things happened during it. Anna Eklund apparently vomited tobacco leaves and began speaking in multiple different languages and spoke in the voice of her deceased Aunt Mina. Her behavior was so violent that many nuns who assisted in the exorcism actually asked to move away. Furthermore, the priest believed she'd been possessed by multiple people. On the 23rd day, Father Reisinger attempted one final exorcism, ordering the demons to depart hell in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Suddenly, Anna Eklund awoke. She claimed they are gone and then collapsed. Upon awakening, Eklund was freed from the church and went on to apparently live a quiet, demon-free life under a new name. Salvador Dali's exorcism. Salvador Dali was one of the greatest artists of the 20th century. Amongst his most famous works are The Lobster Telephone, presently at the National Gallery of Modern Art in Scotland, The Persistence of Memory, which has been displayed at the Museum of Modern Art in New York since 1934, and The Burning Giraffe at the Fine Arts Museum. Upon his return to Spain in 1948, after time abroad in France and America, he developed a style. This was known as nuclear mysticism and was based on science and the classical period. For a man who was supposedly so taken by science, he was also a devout Catholic. At some point in the 1940s, between his time in America and then his return to Spain, Dali allegedly experienced the wrong side of Catholicism. Many didn't know, but the esteemed painter believed he was possessed and ordered a priest to exorcise him. We don't know exactly what happened to Dali during the exorcism, or even if it helped in any way. However, many are unsure if he was even possessed in the first place. However, we do know the exorcism took place, and for some time afterwards, many of Darley's paintings involved religion in some way. After the priest emigrated to France, the sculpture was left behind and remained in his basement. It was recently discovered by his family, who were sifting through the father's belongings in his home. This made it likely that exorcism did in fact happen. The alleged truth about exorcisms. Some may say that demons or other spiritual entities possessing a human is very unbelievable and a rather unconvincing event. However, we can't ignore the stories which have been told about exorcisms. According to many priests, exorcisms can be extremely dangerous. Father Barry May has performed many exorcisms during his time. He shared some stories on the creepy and frightening experience that exorcisms are. Father May explained that during some exorcisms he had performed, he has been yelled and shouted at, grabbed and sworn at, and has been assaulted. He's also described he's had people try to rip his crucifix from around his neck and try to scratch his eyes out. He expressed that he gets it all the time during an exorcism. Father May has been through quite a lot while performing these cleansing rituals. Although he says the green vomiting and head spinning isn't real and is what you mostly see in movies, but the violent screams and voices are real. Father May first forayed into the darker side of religion when a woman at a funeral he was conducting asked him if he believed in ghosts. He thought it was a rather strange question to ask, but when the woman claimed she thought her house was also inhabited by a ghost, he continued the conversation. This sparked Father May's interest in exorcism. And even though he's carried out dozens of these devilish practices, some stand out more than others. He revealed one which has stayed with him. That was from a 23-year-old woman. He remembers saying to her, "Are you free yet?" She kept repeating, "No, I'm not," in her own voice. He explained it took hours to deliver her. He stated that as soon as he said, "Spirit, reveal yourself," she would growl and cross her eyes. He believes she threw about 12 demons out until she was free. The Catholic Church recognizes a few different types of exorcism, including both minor and major. Minor exorcisms usually involve the cross, holy water, and some raised voices in a holy place. Generally, this is enough to drive the spirit from the affected body. Nonetheless, major exorcisms can sometimes take place. These only occur in extreme circumstances, and the afflicted has to undergo major investigation and examination before the exorcism. Whilst exorcisms can thrust a demon straight out of somebody, there's a chance they can manifest into another person in the room. Some Catholic ministers attribute cases of possession to people who have been meddling with things they shouldn't have been getting involved with. For example, those who dabble in the paranormal and own things they shouldn't own are at increased risk of possession. Religion is a complicated thing for some, and healing or support process for many. It's neither right nor wrong to be religious, and it's okay to believe in whatever you want to. For those who are skeptical, however, the darker side of religion can and has had unintended consequences. So next time you think about exploring that haunted building or buying that ghostly artifact, maybe think twice. So what do you make of these interesting and creepy exorcisms? Bigfoot holds the title as being one of the most famous cryptids. Cryptids are creatures that are not recognized by science, with amateur researchers saying that although scientists don't believe they exist, so many people have reported them that further studies need to be conducted. Over time, Bigfoot has been used to refer to an ancient legendary creature, a giant human ape-looking figure, which is claimed to run the dense forests of Pacific Northwest. Over the years, thousands of people have come forward with their encounters, each one matching the previous witnesses. This in turn has caused some to think that there could be a giant undiscovered ape roaming our planet, and that it uses the thick frosted regions to stay hidden. Scientists have claimed that the creature bearing resemblance to an ape is a human relative, which dates back as far as 15,000 years ago, although all of this evidence and claims are yet to be proven. It's as if Bigfoot only selects a certain type of person to reveal itself to, because every scientific endeavor to prove their existence has ended up being a futile journey. There's also been a worrying amount of individuals that have gone missing in forested regions and national parks. Not only this, but individuals have claimed to have seen large humanoids and strange sounds while at these places, causing some to put forward the idea that they prefer to live in isolated places away from humans. Those who have seen Bigfoot have reported seeing footprints and even faces, which look like that of a human, but upon closer look at the features, it's evident that it's not human. Interestingly, this has caused some to venture out into the wilderness and carry out their own experiments. One interesting image that floats around for us Bigfoot groups is this one that asks if anyone is willing to be human bait for a Bigfoot project. Turns out, though, that when you visit this site, you are redirected back to YouTube, where Rick Astley is never going to give you up as playing. Although in this case, it was a joke. People have claimed to have offered themselves to Bigfoot. It seems, though, that the creatures are not really interested in humans and do a great job at staying away from us. They're only usually encountered when someone ventures deep into forested areas. One interesting story is that of Albus Osman, who claims that he was taken by an adult Bigfoot and taken to his family. After being dragged and carried for what he believes was 3 hours, Osman was finally dropped. He described hearing 4 voices, speaking in a language he didn't understand. He also noted that it was too dark to make them out. However, as the sun came up, he got a good look. There were indeed 4 of them. He described them as an old man and an old woman, along with a young boy and a young girl. He estimated the old woman to have been 7 feet tall and 500 pounds, with the old man being even bigger. He was sure that his gun would not affect the large man, except for maybe angering him, so he sat and contemplated his escape. He managed to get out of the ordeal and didn't tell people about his story until years later, fearing that he would be judged. Many interesting stories have come to the surface over the years involving Bigfoot. Some of these interesting accounts detail that of the military encountering Bigfoot. There have been many reported sightings of a massive legendary creature known as Bigfoot. They are mostly sighted in remote areas, sometimes in urban and very rarely in city parks. However, the most unlikely place you would think to see a Bigfoot is near a military base. Yet some researchers have argued there have been more reports of Bigfoot being sighted by military personnel than civilians. Throughout the years, there have been a few reports that have leaked from military installations, mostly those around the 1970s. By far the most notable and most credible is that of encounter near Fort Lewis in the U.S. This is an Army military installation in Washington state, which is in the middle of a rather large wooded area. The year was 1978. A truck full of soldiers coming back from training exercises broke down at around 8 p.m. Attempts were made to restart the engine, but nothing worked. So the platoon headed off to the base on foot to bring back a tow truck. They left one Edwin Godoy to guard the truck until the tow truck arrived. He was left because he was the one who had signed out the truck. Edwin spent hours by himself just sitting in the trunk. He was bored, but this evening would soon perk up. At around midnight, he began to hear strange sounds from the forest, as the truck was on a road that cut through this forest. The sounds continued to get louder and closer, prompting Edwin to get out of the trunk, arming himself with a rifle and a flashlight. As he stood in front of the trunk, sweeping the sides of the woods with his flashlight, he caught a glimpse of a large object moving directly in front of the trunk. It was a tall, broad creature entirely covered in hair that walked by swinging its body sideways. When Irwin shined his light at the creature, it stopped in its tracks and stared directly at him. They locked eyes for a short time before the creature began to run at him at a baffling quick speed. Irwin shouted 3 times for the creature to stop and identify itself. However, the beast didn't reply and got close enough to cause harm to Irwin. Grit with fear, he shot the creature in the chest. This barely stopped the speed of the animal. It merely growled, grabbed its chest and turned to the right and went back into the forest. In a few seconds, it was gone. After a long and fearful night, the mechanics finally arrived. After Irwin conveyed what happened, they were quite skeptical until one spotted the blood trail, and this led to massive footprints pressed into the nearby soft ground. Shortly after, a radio call was made to the base explaining what had happened. The area was swamped by secretive government scientists in hazardous material suits. These researchers then began taking blood samples and setting cast of the footprints. The whole time, Edwin was told not to speak to anyone and was kept away from what was going on. After a short time, Edwin was quickly taken to the base hospital. But surprisingly, instead of being examined by the base's medical staff, he was examined by a doctor from the Air Force that held the rank of full colonel. Years later, Edwin went on to reveal in an interview after the event had been declassified that rather than interrogating him, the colonel was very interested in every slight detail of the event, after which Edwin was returned to his barracks and told in no circumstances was he to tell anyone what had happened. So what do you make of these interesting Bigfoot stories? And do you think there's any truth to them? For many years, humans have craved to know if there are any signs of alien life outside of our own planet. With governments keeping secrets, making us humans even more desperate to find out what they could be hiding. To the Stars Academy. You may have heard the name Tom DeLonge. That is because he's a renowned guitarist of popular rock band Blink-182. But his career didn't stop at the top of the music charts. He's the main contributor of the To the Stars Academy, which aims to explore the outer edges of aerospace science. The Academy brings together art, entertainment, science, and aerospace topics, inform the public of scientific phenomena, that is, things that the government and NASA alike have been keeping from us. Namely, the institution does research on UFOs and extraterrestrial life. Tom works alongside the To the Stars Academy founder Jim Semivane, who's a retired CIA intelligence officer. Semivane's credibility as an aerospace researcher and close confidant of the CIA gives the institution a headway as a leading investigative force for space exploration. Because the Academy isn't funded by the government and has far less resources than NASA or SpaceX, they tend to research space phenomena that's already been found, rather than developing the technology to explore space itself. If they were to pursue that path, it would cost millions of dollars and federal backing. However, Tom and the To the Stars Academy may have stumbled upon a space discovery that would open doors for the Academy. They've recovered a mysterious piece of metamaterial that's believed to have come from an unidentified flying object. The piece of alloy metal shows signs of advanced engineering that's never been seen on Earth, or at least hasn't been known by the public eye. The team compared the material to other metal materials already discovered on secretive military base, and couldn't find a match or any evidence this particular material was in the possession of American intelligence. To the Stars Academy, Steve Justice is working on verifying the authenticity of the material, which has proven to be a grueling process. The documentation and validity of the metal has to go through a chain of personnel before it can be considered to be truly authentic. However, Justice is confident the materials couldn't have been faked. This is because the manufacturing that would be necessary to create such a piece of metal is far too advanced for our known earthly engineers. The piece of metamaterial itself looks like a malleable, sparkly gray mold of dirt. It certainly contradicts Hollywood's portrayal of extraterrestrial objects. Typically, we aspire these things to be colorful, shiny, and technologically advanced. This goes to show that even different planets might not be as progressive as we thought, but it also might show that their organic materials transcend the limits of our own on Earth. Tom is undoubtedly excited about this discovery. He's been a long-time space enthusiast who wanted to research UFOs and extraterrestrial life as a side gig to his career as a prominent musician. Starting out, he worked alongside other space enthusiasts who didn't have science or aerospace credentials but a passion for space nonetheless. It wasn't until he met others that he could officially launch a legitimate academy. From that point on, the scientists, intelligence officers, and spacegoers created the To the Stars Academy, which will only continue to thrive under the trustworthy hand of America's top analysts. This metamaterial discovery will undoubtedly pave the way for many other discoveries made by the To the Stars Academy. The Pentagon claims they've retrieved extraterrestrial vehicles and materials. The Pentagon is notorious for being extremely secretive, even ominously so. Many Americans believe the Pentagon is an active part of popular conspiracy theories. This is perpetuated by its members' sworn secrecy. However, people have had enough of the Pentagon's isolation from the general public in the realm of space exploration. People want to know about UFOs, the presence of extraterrestrial life, and its potential threat to American citizens. It wasn't until recently that the Pentagon decided to oblige some of the public's demands for intel. Former astrophysicist for the Pentagon's UFO program and current defense contractor Eric Davis let the Department of Defense know what otherworldly vehicles have presented themselves on Earth. The vague description is intentional, because the Pentagon's UFO force simply doesn't know all the characteristics of these vehicles yet. However, to the common person, what Davis is explaining sounds a lot like a UFO or spaceship. The Pentagon has classified these vehicles as being extraterrestrial, because the technology, materials, and uses of it are something that couldn't have possibly been engineered on Earth yet. In other words, the scientists of the Pentagon have never seen anything like it. It's astounding they've chosen to reveal even this vague information with the general public. New UFO programs within the Pentagon have decided the public deserves some knowledge, that being about potential life forms or technology existing outside of our planet. U.S. intelligence is still concerned with the nature of these objects, of course. Part of the reason secrecy is so important when investigating new technology is for the sake of national defense. Because the vehicles approach Earth with no intended motive, we can't be sure if other life forms are simply trying to contact us, threaten us, or if the incident was just an event. The Pentagon is working towards investigating the material to determine the threat these could present. There's no telling how long the Pentagon and the Department of Defense will take to examine the materials in these unknown vehicles. Because this incident hasn't been reported until now, there seems to be no protocol for these investigative measures. Depending on their findings, government officials are concerned with how the public will react to the news of extraterrestrial visitors. Until then, the investigation is classified. Could there be life? Over 4,000 exoplanets discovered. It's no secret that our universe is exponentially large, larger than we as humans can even begin to comprehend. There are billions of galaxies in the universe, and even more planets. Most scientists believe that number could be in the trillions. So what's so significant about an exoplanet? An exoplanet is a unique kind of planet. Typically, when we think of a planet, we think of a standalone sphere that's orbited by moons. However, an exoplanet is actually a planet that orbits around a singular star instead of the other way around. The Earth and the other planets in our solar system aren't referred to as exoplanets. This is despite the fact they orbit around a singular star, the Sun. Instead, we use the term to describe other planets outside of our solar system that orbit around a singular star as well. Discovering these exoplanets is extremely important. The proximity from which the planet orbits around the star is cause for life potential on that exoplanet. If the planet orbits closely, the planet's surface might be too hot for life to exist, meaning there'd be no water and the harsh conditions would deter any cellular growth. However, if the exoplanet orbits too far from the star, it would be completely frozen and unable to inhabit any life forms. NASA scientists have developed a space probe known as Kepler, which floats around space searching for inhabitable exoplanets. Kepler detects the distance from an exoplanet to the star it's orbiting, the strength and brightness of the star, and the gravitational relationship between the two. This is then used to determine if it could inhabit life. Kepler's data is then returned to NASA scientists for them to determine if the distance, temperature, and reliability of the exoplanet's climate resembles that of Earth's. In the recent years, scientists have discovered a record-breaking 4,000 exoplanets. The potential for life increases substantially when more and more have been discovered. NASA has launched an exoplanet investigation program, which aims to discover undeniable evidence that life forms exist on other planets. However, NASA scientists are trying to win a competitive and complicated race to discover the first Earth-like climate in an exoplanet. They have a few obstacles in front of them. They need more advanced telescopes, a better understanding of the chemistry that initiates life, and ultimately decades of time for studying. NASA scientist and MIT graduate Sarah Seeger is actively looking for otherworldly chemical reactions that are similar to that on Earth. Namely, she's trying to detect the presence of carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, sulfur, phosphorus, and hydrogen. Not only this, but the chemicals have to be at a safe level for life conception. This is extremely difficult to detect when the scope of the exoplanets is about the size of a grain of salt. It's safe to say there's likely exponential amounts of exoplanets within our universe. There's a great deal of opportunity for life on many of these planets, however, it's just a matter of finding it. So what do you make of these extraterrestrial discoveries? Whether it's the setting of a new adventure film or the home of an exotic culture, the jungle has long held a place of fascination in the minds of many due to its mystery and the secrets cloaked within. Its vast expanse and dangerous undergrowth leave many to wonder what exactly lies at the heart of that tangle of vines. Occasionally, discoveries are made that answer some of these questions, while others only leave us with more uncertain puzzles. UFO seen above jungle. The mysteries of the Amazon rainforest jumped out at one unsuspecting viewer as he surfed through satellite images on Google Maps and noticed something rather odd amongst the trees. In an uninhabited area of the Brazilian state Rondônia, where there should have only been miles and miles of jungle, a mysterious line of lights stuck out from the treetops. These glowing orbs were arranged in a straight line and were only visible with the satellite pictures taken above. Whatever it may be, one thing is certain. It's incredibly large and stands out in sharp relief when compared to the towering jungle trees surrounding it. Frictive appeared on satellite images, meaning it also has to be large enough to be visible from space, ruling out any technological glitches or lights from small tribal dwellings. As there's no modern civilization nearby that could be responsible for something so enormous and glowing, many alien fanatics claim that this is evidence of a hidden spaceship or UFO. This isn't the first instance of an unexplainable, potentially alien occurrence in the Brazilian rainforest. UFO sightings are relatively frequent, and residents of outlying cities and villages often report seeing odd orbs or lights floating above the trees. Early in 2020, Brazilian citizens witnessed what appeared to be a spaceship crashing into the rainforest. This supported their claims with images that were found on Google Maps. However, these images disappeared from the server soon after. This prompted conspiracy theorists to speculate that a government cover-up was involved. Potentially the most famous, as well as ancient phenomenon indicating a possible alien presence in the area, is an array of earthen rings, which have recently been discovered to predate the rainforest itself. Although these instances have been thoroughly investigated, there hasn't been much of a satisfactory explanation. This makes these newly sighted orbs all the more mysterious. These frequent unexplainable UFO sightings, coupled with the new discovery of enormous glowing orbs deep within the Brazilian rainforest, lead some to wonder whether this truly is a sign of alien life, or a top-secret government project choosing to operate within the privacy of the jungle. What is certain, however, is that regardless of whether the cause is extraterrestrial or not, there's undoubtedly something mysterious lurking within these uncharted depths. The baffling man-made rainforest on Ascension Island. As Earth's population explodes and resources dwindle, scientists look for solutions to the problem of how to support our growing numbers. The answer might lie within a thriving jungle on an island which only 150 years ago was a barren, volcanic wasteland. Ascension Island in the Atlantic Ocean was a British military outpost. Was also a stop on Charles Darwin's famous voyage to the Galapagos. At that time, the island was an uninhabitable landscape and was rumored to only have a single tree. Darwin himself described it as hideous and completely destitute of trees. However, Richard Ottness Sir Joseph Hooker saw the potential for a valuable research experiment and began importing thousands of trees to the remote destination, in what would blossom into the planet's first artificial ecosystem. Beginning in 1843, Hooker oversaw the introduction of a variety of botanical scraps to the barren wasteland. This included species of trees and birds from countries all over the world. Argentinian fruit trees were planted next to Australian ferns, and by 1970, there were over 5,000 trees that had begun to flourish and organize themselves into a thriving ecosystem. This later was termed Green Mountain, after the lush foliage that was beginning to take over. By 1890, the importation had stopped because the fittest plants had established themselves and begun to thrive totally unaided from human intervention. The soil and hydrology composition of the island also altered over time. The British military troops that were stationed there reported more hospitable conditions due to the new explosion of foliage. Scientists and researchers were quick to recognize the future implications of Green Mountain. The beautiful, thriving, independent ecosystem that erupted relatively quickly should have taken millennium to evolve. Rainforest ecosystems are highly complex and interactive, where every species feels a vital, niche role. Were previously thought to only arise after thousands of years of species evolution. The fact that Green Mountain was able to produce such an organized landscape so quickly, and with such a variety of species, caused researchers to question their previous theories concerning rainforest evolution. The phenomenon was so unusual and unexpected that in the late 1990s, scientists borrowed a science fiction term to describe what became known as the process of artificially creating a viable ecosystem, and potentially offers many answers for the future of our life on Earth. Studying Ascension Island can help provide insight on how to green Earth to feed more people through terraforming, instead of altering already viable ecosystems and rifting the extinction of vital indigenous species. They investigated how Mars or the Moon could be terraformed quickly by fitting the right species with the terrain, similar to Green Mountain being surrounded by a barren volcanic landscape not entirely unlike those of potential extraterrestrial colony sites. However, we don't have all the answers yet, as there are still numerous debates about whether the artificial rainforest was simply a result of chance, and whether it's ethical to attempt to experiment elsewhere, and potentially risk the destruction of native species. As scientists study the lush beauty of Ascension Island, perhaps some of these questions can be answered as humanity attempts to bring terraforming into the future. Encounters with the Maricoxi. Jungles and rainforests have long been home to many unique civilizations and tribes, all with varying degrees of isolation. Some coexist quite peacefully with their modern neighbors. Others remain cloaked in the secrecy that the deep jungle provides, and are primarily known through legends that are passed down through those who have encountered them. Perhaps one of the most mythical civilizations of this kind lies in the heart of the Amazon. Local tribes have a long oral history of huge, hairy mantis that dwell within the jungle, but there have been little to no documented encounters with these people. Termed the Maricoxi, they exist mostly in stories centering around the danger and secrecy of the deep rainforest. They'd perhaps be better written off as a legend entirely if it weren't for the documentation of explorer Colonel Percy Fawcett. Fawcett wandered the Amazon for years searching for the lost city of Z. He became well acquainted with many of the local tribes. He clinically noted all of his adventures and documented the fantastical stories the natives told him about a group of hairy man-beasts living in the depths of the jungle. However, it appears he only ever actually encountered the Maricoxi once. This was when his group stumbled into some on their travels. He described the encounter as, with exponentially long arms and with foreheads sloping back from pronounced eye ridges, men of a very primitive kind that were unclothed. That night, as his men tried to sleep, they heard the haunting sounds of braying horns echoing through the trees. He reported that the sound was as eerie as the opening notes of some fantastic opera. When day broke, however, the forest betrayed no sign of the so-called savages, until they stumbled upon a village full of men and women they had met previously. Fawcett described the village as full of primitive shelters, where squatted some of the most villainous savages he had ever seen, and remarked upon their use of basic tools and weapons and their language composed of grunts and whistles. Mysteriously, Fawcett didn't investigate this tribe he had found, and moved on with his expeditions, making no more mention of the Maricoxi in his account, which became the only documented encounter with these people. Some say Fawcett's documentation was exaggerated and sensationalized out of rudeness for the quote savages of the jungle. Others point out that Fawcett remained decidedly unbiased and gave an incredibly accurate description of his dealings with other tribes. Whether the group that he encountered was actually the Maricoxi or not, the tribe lives on in local myths and legends as the South American version of Bigfoot. Nobody's ever been able to locate them again to confirm Fawcett's account. With the vastness of the rainforest on their side, we may never be able to confirm whether the Maricoxi truly exists or not. Fawcett's expedition notes remain one of the only documented instances of an encounter. The depths of the jungle cloaks many mysteries, and although we might occasionally uncover hints of what lies deep inside, will likely never truly discover the truth of everything that lurks under the entangled foliage. Signs of alien life, UFOs, mythical tribes, and even the key to the future of our planet are all out there, waiting to be found. It's now only a matter of time of who is brave enough to venture into those mysterious places to uncover the secrets hidden within. So what do you make of these jungle discoveries? For many fans, Terminator 2 Judgment Day is a strong sequel. Due to the rest of the franchise, it stands out as being one of the best Terminator films. Interestingly, a few days ago, it was announced that scientists at the Army and Texas A&M University have developed a new type of material that has the ability to automatically heal. This immediately reminded many of the T-1000 from Terminator 2. This new technology is noted as being the first of its kind. The scientists have said the materials will likely be used in future military platforms. Frank Gardier, who's an aerospace engineer, is known for his work in the U.S. Army's combat capabilities. Army officials have said they're trying to look to the future, and that there's a possibility this new technology could be used for air and ground missions. Frank Gardier said the following about the materials. We want a system of materials to simultaneously provide structure, sensing, and response. Most crosslink materials, especially those that are 3D printed, tend to have a fixed form, meaning that once you manufacture your parts, the materials cannot be reprocessed or melted. This new material is noted as being able to go from a solid to a liquid several times, and that due to its memory behavior, a certain shape can be programmed into it, allowing it to transform back into its preferred shape. As of right now, the researchers have said it's still in its early stages, but the testing has shown this could soon become a reality and could be implemented into the military's arsenal. Interestingly, it's also been announced by the military that they're working on technology to create phantom aircrafts. The U.S. Navy has patented technology to create these images, and it's thought they will be created with infrared technology. One of the issues that the military has faced is being able to protect military aircrafts from enemy missiles. Various ideas have been put forward in the past, and although some have helped, none have been able to stop these attacks. The system has been described as the following. There can be multiple laser systems mounted on the back of air vehicles, with each laser system generating a ghost image, so that it gives off the idea there would be multiple aircrafts present. Interestingly, this has caused some to suggest that the U.S. has already been using this tank, and that this could be behind some of the UFO sightings that have been reported in recent years. It's also been announced that the U.S. Army is going forward with plans to create an extremely powerful laser weapon. The indirect fire protection capability high energy is said to be a 300 upward kilowatt weapon. It's interesting to note that at this moment in time, the United States Navy is currently using this tank. However, the laser weapon they use is nowhere near as powerful as this one that's in development. In fact, it's reported that this new laser weapon will be over 10 times more powerful than the one the United States Navy uses. So what do you make of this new material that's able to go from a solid to a liquid several times? The men who saved bear cubs. It was a normal fishing trip for Ruslan Lukanen and his friend until they noticed something floating out in the middle of the lake. The pair were out on a lake, which was an extremely frigid body of water in the northwestern area of Russia. Temperatures in the lake can drop as low as 4 degrees below zero. The dangerously low temperatures sparked concern in the fishermen. They knew that if the floating object were a person, the person would be in a life-threatening. However, as the pair got closer, they realized the object wasn't a person, but a mother brown bear. She had 2 cubs on her back and was swimming through a swift current. The bears likely had no choice but to try to cross the water, despite the current and chill. This was because food is scarce in the tundra. Bears mostly eat berries and salmon, and they may have needed to find more berries on the other side. When facing these difficult situations, mother bears are known to risk their lives for their cubs. So the fisherman was surprised when they saw that the mother bear had abandoned her cubs. Her survival instinct had kicked in and took precedence over her bond with her cubs. The pair quickly realized that the cubs weren't strong swimmers and that it was up to them to take action in order for them to survive. Lukanen later recalled, the 2 steered their boat to the first cub, and it seemed that the baby bear knew instinctively they were there to help him. He instantly tried to climb onto the boat, but was too weak. One of them tried to boost the bear up with a fishing net, but the cub was too heavy for this to be done easily. Eventually, the cub displayed extra strength and made it onto the boat. Now the second cub was even weaker, having remained in the water for longer. The bear couldn't lift itself up, and the fishermen couldn't lift the bear in the however. The men thought quickly and found a solution. They realized the cub could use its claw to hang onto the net. So they scooped the bear into the net, and instead of lifting up, they slowly drove the boat back to shore. Then they faced a new problem. Getting the cubs back to land would be difficult. Mother bears are known to be extremely aggressive when her babies are approached, and the fishermen didn't know what to expect. Regardless, they headed towards the island they saw the mother swim to, and left them there under a tree until the mother returned. The men had succeeded in bringing the bears to safety, even after putting themselves in a dangerous situation. Even though the bears couldn't express it, they definitely appreciated it. Raju the crying elephant is saved. Animal rescue can be dangerous, tragic, and seemingly hopeless, but the success always pays off. On July 4, 2014, Raju, an elephant who had been chained and beaten for 50 years, cried as he was taken to freedom in an incredible and emotional wildlife rescue. Raju had been shackled at a home in Uttar Pradesh area of India, living on handouts from tourists passing by. He survived solely on plastic and paper for food. Every day, his owner would sit on his back and force him along hot asphalt streets to make tips. He was believed to have been poached from his mother at a young age. Usually poachers slaughter the mother or drive the herd into small traps that only babies can fall into. Then the babies are tied and beaten in submission to their owners, their spirits broken. The mother cries for her baby for days after it's poached. As Raju was poached as a car, he had been sold so frequently he'd believed to have had up to 27 owners. He was treated as an expendable object that was passed on to someone new every 2 years. Raju was suffering immensely under the owner that he was rescued from. He was beaten with a bullhook, a sharp metal spear used to train elephants in an abusive way. His nails were overgrown, his shackles caused wounds, and walking on a tarmac road caused overgrowing in his footpad. Hearing of this plight, Wildlife SOS, a London-based charity organization, committed to his rescue, took an entire year of hard work to ensure his freedom. The charity had to prove that Raju wasn't legally owned. It was revealed that his quoted owner didn't have any legal documents stating his possession, so the charity was cleared by the court to rescue him. They then enacted 2 days of intense surveillance to come up with the safest possible game plan for the mission. A year after the organization learned of Raji's story, 10 vets and wildlife experts, 20 forestry department officers, and 6 policemen were able to take him away from his suffering in a dangerous midnight operation. Wildlife SOS founder described the chains around Raji's legs as cutting into his flesh due to the spikes on the chain. Every movement would make him gush from the wounds. Pain and brutality were all he knew. It was elaborated on the details of his rescue, stating, "We quickly realized we had to act as fast as possible. His situation was so desperate and cruelty so extreme, we decided we had to move the rescue forward by a day. But the owner was willing to get in the way." The situation was described as, "He began to shout commands to terrify Raju and try to provoke him. It created an incredibly threatening situation as a bull elephant can break a human like a toothpick if he becomes frightened or angry. When that failed, he then put a series of chains around his legs in an attempt to prevent us from removing him. But we stood our ground and refused to back down, and as we did so, tears began to roll down the elephant's face. It's believed the tears were partially motivated by a sense of coming change. The elephant felt hope for the first time since his suffering began. The tears sparked strong emotions for the team. According to Wildlife SOS UK spokesperson, it was reported that the team were astonished to see tears roll down his face during the rescue. It was so unbelievably emotional for all of us. We knew in our hearts he realized he was being freed. Elephants aren't only majestic, but are highly intelligent animals. They've proven to have feelings of grief, so we can only imagine what torture half a century have been like for him. Until we intervened, He never had known what it was like to walk like unshackled. It's truly heartbreaking and a distressing case. But today, he knows what freedom is, and he'll learn what kindness feels like, and what it's like not to suffer anymore. But the team had no time to process their emotions. They still had work to do. They walked Raju 200 yards to a transportation truck. They couldn't remove his trains on site, so no step of the walk was made easy or painless. Still, he complied and was eventually loaded onto a large truck. He was sedated and driven 350 miles to the Elephant Conservation and Care Center. There, he was fed and his shackles were removed. It took the handlers 45 minutes to fully liberate him from his bonds, which were put on to ensure removing them would be difficult and painful. Ultimately, he received all of his medical attention and care that he needed and is thriving at the center 6 years later. He socialized with other elephants, including his new companions, Rajesh and Bola, and healed his broken spirit. Diane Busher's cat saves family. Pets need their families to survive, and it turns out sometimes families need their pets. On January 23, 2008, Diane Busher woke up at 4:45 to the sound of loud screeching from her cat, Oreo. She followed the noise to the garage and was faced with smoke and flames. She sprinted upstairs to wake her husband and their 5 children. Everyone was able to evacuate safely and firefighters soon arrived to extinguish the fire. It was ultimately revealed the fire was caused by an electrical problem in the garage. This led to an estimated $60,000 in damages. Due to the delay in smoke detectors, it's hard to know what would have happened if the cat didn't alert the family. It certainly would have been perilous for everyone involved. Before the incident, most of the family wasn't fond of cats. However, after this, Oreo is loved even more by every single member of the family. He's now spoiled by a generous amount of tuna. So what do you make of these heartwarming stories and how humans and animals can work together when it comes to life or death?